In high school, did you think you'd be doing this? I'm like, absolutely not. I did not think this was the path. Um, but for me, I kind of like followed breadcrumbs of desires. I was doing more traditional life coaching for many years, and this theme would come up, of course, here and there. Um, but for me, what really, I started practicing the work when I was introduced in a more like formal setting via classes and trainings, and I was like, oh, whoa, like there's a lot, this is like a deeper topic than I thought. Like I thought, like I'll get pleasure, and so then I went on the journey of really following that path.
And then here you are today explaining that you can actually heal yourself and your relationships through pleasure. So so I guess let's define what pleasure is and then we'll get into it. So what is pleasure in this context?
Totally, I love that. So obviously, some of us our brain goes to, oh, pleasure, and it can be like that's a bit cool. We love that. That's available. But the pleasure that I'm speaking of, in addition to that, is living pleasurably moment to moment. And what I mean by that is joyfully, being alive, feeling present, right? Like I always give this example, but I use it for a reason. It's like really listening. When you're listening to that jazz music, do you really hear all the different instruments? When you're drinking your, glass of kombucha, ooh, can I taste the different flavor? Like, can I, taste that this is lavender versus guava? Whatever. Like we're really alive to our senses and we're there, we're present. And for me, I think it's so funny because, you can imagine there's so much like cultural, religious, societal shame around pleasure, as we can go into. But for me, it's been such a profound spiritual experience because it's been me being in the present moment. Like it's really allowed me to be in the present moment, to feel safety, to feel trust. That again, that's a side tangent, but to redefine pleasure is finding those joys, finding that safety, finding that aliveness in the moment to moment. Into the honestly, it's the mundane. Like, how can we add more joy to the mundane?
Yeah, I think people see like they see a woman, they see a man, they see the title pleasure, they're like, "Oh my god."
Right.
Right?
What is this going to be about? Scandalous.
Yeah, do we need like a parental advice? Do you remember parental advisory
Of
label on
course.
the
You're like, uh-oh, what is this about? And I'm like, wait, I'm like, it could be, but and I think that's the shame of it all. You know what I mean? Is often we don't even engage in this conversation because the fear and the conditioning that, oh my gosh, it's going to be this. It's like, hold on. Like, sure, but also there's such a deeper, for me, I should mention when I started getting into this work, I was like, I didn't realize like I wasn't really fully living. Like I didn't really realize that. And I'm like, oh my God, there's so much more to life. There's so much more corny, but like there's so much more magic. There's so much more beauty in the world that I didn't know, that I was totally tapped out of, and that is one of the beautiful side effects of this work.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I remember I ordered a number of books because I usually like to get the books of the guests that I interview. And I interviewed someone who is similar, like she helps women with their pleasure and things like that. So I ordered a book and I took a picture of the books I ordered and I shared it with a few people, but I forgot that book was in the picture, right? So front and center is a book about like orgasms and pleasure, right? And then people look at me, they're like, terrain, what's that? Like, forget the other
Right.
4 or 5 books, right? All they could focus in
Of
on that,
course.
right? And I was like, no, I was like, you want to learn more and you want to be better at not only for yourself but for your partner, right? But they're all thinking it's like something straight out of our teenage years with the doors locked, the
Totally.
drapes are closed, and you have your favorite triple X movie. But for couples or for let's say for like women
Yeah.
who are trying to understand pleasure and how it applies to their life, like how do you help them understanding the importance of pleasure, not only for themselves, but for their relationships?
I love that. It's funny. Before we dive in, like if I work one to one with someone, before we dive in to sexual sensual, before we even get there, and before we even get into like living pleasure, enjoying your kombucha, I'm like, let's go into the reasons that you're resistant to this. You know what I mean? Because we all, like I said, we all hold stories where whether it's societal, cultural, religious, like there's all these reasons why we hold like, ugh, pleasure is disgusting, pleasure is bad, it's naughty. Some people hold, a blood, sweat, and tears story, or I'll get a treat after I do A, B, and C. Some folks hold a worthiness, a deep sense of unworthiness. And like I don't really I don't des or deservingness, right? Like I don't really deserve that. I'm not really worthy of that. Or keep it moving. Like there's so many different reasons why people don't believe pleasure is a worthy cause. So first and foremost, before I begin with someone and we dive fully in, I want to get underneath like what stories do you hold about pleasure? What crunch do you have? Like, do you think it's gross? Do you think it's a worthwhile cause? Do you think this is stupid? And it's funny, like from a business perspective too, like a lot of my I could suppose like my marketing or it's making a cause for pleasure. Because most people are like, that's nice. That is absolutely the bottom of the barrel. Like I like that is so not why is this lady talking about this? Like, there's so many other things to focus on. I'm not focused on this. So, for me, that's where I start, right? Like, what stories do we hold? What crunchy beliefs do we have? And then from there, we make a case. Why is this worthy? Because I always say this. My teacher had this great quote, and she would say, "Pleasure is the easiest thing conceptually to understand." But it's the hardest thing to implement. Like we all are like, duh, like this is cool, but it's very hard. All of our stuff comes up when we want to apply it, our worthiness or deservingness, blah, 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 blah. So again, first and foremost, move through the stories. And then second, we talk about why is this a worthwhile cause? Like, why do you want to fight for this? Because we're gonna be in the trenches and we're gonna like be like, like I don't need to do this. So that's why I'm like, okay, like let's make sure our why is so defined that when we're like, I'm good, that we have something to keep coming back to.
What are then some of the obstacles that people will face when it comes to understanding what you just shared?
Oh, that's such a good question. Everything, like everything. And again, it's different for some people, right? Like I have some clients that come in and may have experienced trauma. And for them, it's in their body like, hey, Erica, I'm fundamentally scared to feel good because in the past I felt good and I got the rug pulled out from underneath me. So like I'm actually terrified to implement feeling good because what if I get the rug you know, pulled out from me beneath me again. Like I'm scared. So for everyone, we hold different stories. Even when we work through it, again, society does not value this work. So I've worked through tons of my stories, thank God. But transparently, like this is not the norm. So like I have to get up every day and choose this. I wish I remember I would see my teacher the first time I saw my teacher and I was like, this woman lives on a pink cloud. Like, like I just was so deluded to what the truth was. I was like, she lives on a pink cloud and people are, feeding her grapes and she's just live, laugh, loving. You know what I mean? I was like, wow, like that is, and I didn't realize like, oh my God, like this is a conscious practice. Like this takes, and that's what I talked about with the why, like getting up and showing up for this. And I'll mention this briefly. I actually have I put this in I have a free ebook and I put it in my ebook like, hey, here's some reasons why. When we forget and we're like, I'm out, like here's some reasons why. For me, it's helped me with anxiety, severe anxiety, moments of depression, healing my nervous system, healing trauma. Like these are big dogs. You know what I mean? Like these are big dogs. And they've really transformed um my life. Confidence. I was working on self-love for so many years. And cool, like it made a dent. But me focusing on pleasure, it totally changed the game. So I know I went on a little tangent there, but I think it's important again to identify that why. Like, why am I going to show up for this again? Like, I have to do it. What am I doing? I have to do it again. But so I think that's an important piece of this conversation.
Yes, I think everyone should understand why they do certain things. Like I remember I spoke to a young lady and I remember I was asked this and I shared it where anytime there was a conversation about, let's say, sexual performance in the bedroom or just intimacy overall, she made it a point to volunteer or make it known that she participates. right?
Mhm.
She's like, oh, I'm not one of those people that will just lay there, starfish, whatever it is you want to call it, right?
Right.
So I remember one time we were just talking and I asked her, I was like, why do you go out of your way to mention that you're an active participant in the bedroom? And she was like, well, I want to make sure that if I'm with someone, they know that I'm there to do something instead of just not doing anything. And then I look at it from a male perspective, we don't have that burden of that, right? We have the burden of performance. Men will go around and be like, you know what? I just gave Erica the best love of her life. Like the sex
Right.
was just chef's kiss, right? I was on top
Totally.
of my game, this and that. So it's interesting to see the dynamic how men will go out of their way to say how good they are, and then some
Yes.
women will go out of their way to say participant, how great of a participant they are. Why do you
Sure.
think that is?
Yeah, I think you just brought something beautiful up is for a lot of humans, honestly, but I do see a lot of women having this pattern, is there's a performative pattern. Like I feel like I have to perform. I feel like I have to earn, love, respect. And often when I talk with clients with, about pleasure, they're like, "Oh, like this is very triggering because in a way like does it matter, Erica? Like I almost rather not have how should I say this? So for some people, it's ingrained in our brains and our bodies that if I perform, I'll get safety. If I perform, I'll get love. And so for me to come in and say, "Hey, like cool, like let's obviously, we want to give and be kind and generous, but also like your receiving's important as well, just as important. And also that makes the other person feel, special, et cetera, et cetera. But for some people, that's like highly triggering because they're like, I don't care about that. I rather have love, acceptance, praise, approval. And they think with performing, they will get those things. So introducing pleasure like hey you're allowed to feel good in the process can feel quite radical because they've been programmed to think I to perform equals love, and so part of our work is creating safety, unpacking that story, right, and then creating safety in something else that like you're allowed to have pleasure, it's safe to have pleasure, it's safe to to be your to be yourself. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be performative. So I think that is a little part of that conversation. I see it honestly time and time and time and time again is this performative piece, and people thinking their safety in the performative piece.
Yeah, because the bedroom is such a vulnerable place to be in a lot of
Right.
ways, right? And it's
Oh
it's
yeah.
something that to your point, right? Like a lot of people don't talk about like how many times you'll be walking down the street and you hear someone maybe talk about their day, their family, but you don't necessarily hear people talk about last night
Right.
I did
Totally.
this, right? Or in 2 days I'm gonna do that. Why do you think then there's maybe the hesitation to have the conversation about making it safe? So not only can we perform the way that we want to, but to receive the way that we want to.
Ooh, that's such a good question. Ooh, that's such a good question. I think that's an edge too. I hear often people are like, I feel bad. I don't want to ask for too much. I don't want to, I don't want to correct if, it's like often, I mean, from what I've seen, again, some people, everyone, everyone's different, but often I've seen people are like, no, tell me. Like, if I'm doing, like, I would like to support you. You know what I mean? Like, I want to make you happy. Like, if I'm doing the thing, like, please give me guidance. But there's a lot of shame. And I think there's shame for all of us, like even almost like being there. You know what I mean? Or like being in this situation. It's like, like let me just get through this. Or like, like there can sometimes be shame. So it's like, I don't want to be greedy. I don't want to be too much. I don't want to be that fill in the blank for asking for what I want. There's a beautiful quote. Oh my God, I always butcher it. But it's from the movie. I always butcher it, but I'll give you the cliff notes. It's from a movie, A Dangerous Beauty, and my teacher, one of my teachers, Mama Gina, recommended this to us. And the quote says something like, "What is it? To give pleasure." I'm butchering again, but to give pleasure is to know pleasure. And essentially, what the quote means is like, for me to be an excellent giver, I really I need to know how to receive and also give to myself. You know what I mean? Like let's go like so granular, like touch, right? Like I know like I may like this feather touch, or like I'm gonna explore and give myself, more of a scratch, or and it doesn't even have to be in this realm, right? Even like I'm trying a tea, or I'm trying this fish versus a steak, whatever. It's like if we are in the world of pleasure, we know then how to, you know, give out.
That's important to understand that because, like you mentioned, if you don't know what you want,
Right.
then how are you going to be comfortable enough to ask the other person what they want, right? Like I couldn't imagine, and maybe this is because you have your experiences and you have your training in this and you went through it, and maybe because I have my training, I couldn't go back to the other side where it's literally silence in the bedroom.
Hello?
Hello, like am I killing you or am I
Right,
or
like
am I killing you?
what's
Like,
happening? Like what is happening here?
yeah, like there has to be that communication piece. And you mentioned shame, and I think a lot of times a lot of people do feel that way because, to your point, right? If I ask for this, what if the person tells me no? What if the
Right.
person says that you know what, you're stupid for asking that? Like you hear these stories about these responses that are so negative when it comes to that conversation. Like, do you hear that with the people that you work with, where when they try to suggest something or maybe hint at it, it's shut down in such a negative or maybe harsh
Oh
way, then
yeah.
they just automatically close up?
Of course, of course. I'm also going back. I'm scrolling back. I'm laughing how I phrased that last thing. I'm like, give out. Like I'm like, oh God, Erica, that was so aggressive. So forgive me for my, but you know what I mean. Give and receive with ease and grace. And here you just made a great point. The giving and receiving sometimes, oopsies, is not uh easy and flowing. And that's also a part of where people can hold that trauma, right? It's like, oh my God, I was with a partner that was disgusted by what I asked, or even made a comment, or rolled their eyes, or whatever. And we hold that. We hold that those memories inside of our body, inside of our brain. So I hear it all the time, honestly. I hear it all the time. And also think about this, even if it doesn't exactly happen in the bedroom, we pick it up in other ways, right? So I'm making something up, but someone goes and asks for a raise, and they get pushed back of, oh, that's you're being greedy, or you're being this, or whatever, like, right? These patterns, we pick them up in other areas of our life, and we internalize that. And so we think in one of the most vulnerable areas in our life, oh my God, I can't ask for that. Does that make sense? So it's like it correlates direct experiences that have happened in the bedroom, but also just life experience that we're like, I'm not worthy of that. That's too much. That's too this. Like it happens all the time. So the short of it is yes, that is totally, totally a piece of the conversation.
Yeah, gone are the days where you can just push the person's head down wherever it is you want them to
Oh, no,
pleasure, pleasure, right?
no.
Like, this is
But thank God
2025.
too. Thank
Thank God.
God.
Yeah, this is not 1825, everyone. Okay, this is
Totally.
2025.
And
But
to, yeah, t-
no, go
to
ahead.
men, no, to mention too, it's like, thank God, obviously, for all the assortments of reasons, right? But also, it's like, what's cool is I think because part of the consensual conversations, what we're having is, I think we're starting to realize, like, you know, how do I say? Sometimes people could be just so focused on their pleasure, like my pleasure, my pleasure, like, or my pleasure, my pleasure. Let's get to the end result. Let's get to the end result. Let's get to the end result. Uh, that we miss something. Like there could be so much beauty being with another person. There can be so much beauty, like that quote that I said, to know pleasure is to give pleasure is to know pleasure, whatever. It's like that also can be a very pleasurable experience. I've, again, in many of my trainings, I've seen people and I'm like, really? Like I was like, I like see people get so much pleasure and so much fulfillment by giving someone else pleasure. And I was like, are you joking? Like I was like, is this a hoax? Like I thought like, okay, you're being dramatic, but they got so much enjoyment by giving and being in conversation. So I'm sorry to have interrupted, but it's cool. It's a, thank God, again, for many reasons we've moved from that, but also there's a world for us to explore.
What if someone goes into like a situation where it's a new partner
Mhm.
and and both parties are their experience sexually, right? Like no one's a virgin in either scenario. And they enter the situation. Now they have these expectations of what is to happen in the bedroom. What do you think the impact would be to that new couple now when they're both coming with expectations that may not align? And when they actually get to the deed, they're like, oh,
Right. I'm like, oh no. It's okay. The good thing is it's not in stone. Does that make sense? Like it's not like rut like you're incompatible, done. Like it's not a sentence by any means. I think honestly it's an exploration. And there's so many beautiful bodies of work. There's a woman named Jaya that again, there's thousands of different resources, but there's a woman named Jaya that does erotic blueprints. And it's almost like the love languages, like the love language test, like, oh, I'm words of affirmation, blah, blah, blah. What she does is, and again, other amazing teachers as well, but they have blueprints for what is your blueprint, right? So you may be a very sensual person and be partnered with sexual and you're like, oh God, like they're just like, hello, hi, we're getting to business. And you're like, that is so horrendous. Like, for someone that might feel honestly violating. Like, whoa, like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, I'm very dependent on like the lights and the this and the that. And so the beauty of being a mismatch is there's actually conversations and exploration to be had. I know it's annoying because it's like, wouldn't it be great if like we just went right into it? But there is so much beauty there because you get to explore what else is possible and you get to explore where you guys want to meet each other. So again, I know at first it's like, is this like, are we, uh-oh, like, do we leave? Like, is this done? But for me, I think there can often be room for exploration.
and I will share that as part of that exploration, you need a conversation,
Right.
right? Right?
Exactly.
Because consent is so important. And I think sometimes if I look at it from a male perspective, like I know a lot of men, especially coming out of, let's say, the Me Too movement,
Mhm.
we're kind of hesitant to say, okay, what if I suggest this? I don't want it to come across as
Of
maybe
course.
triggering
Totally.
or abusive in some way. So, in your experience, how important is not only the exploration, but the conversation leading up to that exploration?
Oh, that's so beautiful. To equal. You know what I mean? Like equal. And for me, I am actually going to go a step further and add a third step, which is aftercare. My teacher, again, actually, I believe my good friend also, Sarah Jane, she's the owner of Caress, and she teaches this. I believe she got this again from Mama Gina. But she would always say, and again, butchering, but in how we do, you plan an erotic experience, you have the erotic experience, and you digest the erotic experience. And what that means, what that translates here is you plan the erotic experience. Hey, that could be with yourself too, right? Like or planning also means conversation, means setting the boundaries, set it like, hey, like having that conversation. Also, that could be hot. I know it's sometimes like a conversation that feels so sterile. It's like it actually could be beautiful. Like it could open us up to so much more. Also, that conversation could be during the process, like, hey, I don't love this, like keeping that communication open, experiencing the erotic experience, duh, we know what that is, and digesting is after what do I need? What do we need together? Because I think we've all been in situations where it's just been like, bah, like it's just like, oh, you know what I mean? Like, like I don't know, I don't know how to process what just happened. Even if it was great, even if it was a little crunchy, like I need aftercare. I need a place to support